All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance Joint Committee meeting this morning. Hope you all had a very nice weekend. Happy President's Day. With that, if I could please have the committee secretary call the roll this morning.
Senator Brooks.
One moment, Chair. We're unmuting to the room now. Apologies.
Oh, that's okay. No problem.
Chair Colton, we are ready for you to ask the roll whenever you're ready.
All righty. So with that, if I could have our committee secretary please call the roll this morning.
Senator Brooks.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Gokachia.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Hammond. Senator Kiefer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs-Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson. Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Chair Carlton.
And I am here.
Okay, it looks like there are 3 absences.
Thank you very much. Please mark Speaker Frierson absent and the other members present as they arrive. Thank you very much. So good morning again to everyone. We have some budgets in front of us this morning to get a little bit of work done on. So if we could go ahead and start with budget 1532, the Nevada Main Street program.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity today. Let me try to share my screen here. Full screen. I looked, Madam Chair, for a quote about budgets and President's Day, and I found when he was Senator Biden said, "Don't tell me about what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value."
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything better than that one in the historic look back. And so I appreciate this opportunity. I value the people that we have at this agency. When the governor asked me to take on this post, which was not something I sought, he asked me to take this on. We wanted to restore GOAD to its fundamentals. Its fundamentals as a government agency, to bring an analytical approach to economic development in partnership with our regional economic development authorities and our local governments and the business community. I don't see this job as functioning at the 19th hole of a golf course. It's a government agency, and I have taken steps to improve our compliance programs and move forward in partnership. And with that, I'll quickly walk through just a few slides and get right to the budget. I think all of you on this experienced committee understand where this agency came from. And its objectives to diversify the Nevada economy. Since becoming director, like I say, I've worked to strengthen our compliance programs, really integrated our weekly work with regional development authorities, which are state chartered and state supported. The governor basically wanted to see a higher standard of companies coming to Nevada. So we've tried to prioritize social responsibility. And of course, we've had this added mission of administering CARES Act relief programs. I do want to just pause 1 second, though, because when you look at this agency's mission, it's always been to diversify the economy. And I want to draw your attention to this chart. This is the Hockman Index. It's an accepted economic index showing state diversifications. And the score of 100 is the best score. And you can see Nevada is at 67. And yet our surrounding states, particularly our competitive states of Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, are much higher. And to bring the fiscal security that this committee and the legislature seeks will require diversification of the economy. Something that was achieved in the North, and we keep on the wall here this edition of the Reno Gazette from 2010, where it says, is Reno destined to become the Detroit of the West? And today, the Reno economy is one of the most diverse and prosperous in the nation. And this is something that we need to make sure now goes across all Nevada, and is something that I am very committed to. And of course, it was Senator Paul Laxalt that taught me about the 3 states of Nevada, but our friends at Brookings Mountain West has expanded my thinking on this to understand our connectivity across 3 different economic parts of the United States and the Pacific Rim. And I would say that there are countries that would like to have the borders that Nevada have and the opportunities it presents. So the governor obviously put forward an ambitious plan that my agency is working diligently forward on, which will form basically the resilience and recovery efforts for the next 18 months. In partnership with lots of folks around the state. And so with that, I'll turn to the fundamentals of our budget. I do want to just thank those of you who served on the IFC and the Legislative Council Bureau staff for the support you provided during the crisis over the summer as we dealt with pandemic and budgetary issues, and the swift approvals we got for the relief programs and other measures that we stood up. And I don't think we say thank you enough to everyone that kind of made that possible. Go-Out organizational chart, we are a unit of about 41 different folks. Our budget is basically about a little over half general fund, federal funds primarily coming in to support the international program and some of our primarily the international program. Interagency is how we fund the film division through the tourism tax. And then the other funds are basically repayments of loans and things of that nature from some of the heritage programs that Go-Ed. With that, you wanted us to turn to the Main Street program first. So with that, now, obviously to meet, the austerity that Nevada has faced, agencies across the board were requested to take a series of budget reductions. My agency stepped forward, the governor asked for these reductions, and we had to deliver them. We had to do that again, a pandemic against uncertain base of knowledge and uncertain as to what the future held. As we looked forward, to try to meet those budgetary reduction objectives, we had to recognize that some areas would be slowing down because of, just the general slowdown of economic activity and the inability for people to socialize and to work together on projects. So not only there would be an economic slowdown, but there would just be an economic activity in slowdown. And so as we tried to distribute our budget reductions across the agencies, the Main Street program had to take a small reduction for the next fiscal years. We have some funds that were unspent, and so we'd hoped that when we could see restoration of normal activity and we could again get out in the field and work with partners, we were hoping that the remaining funds we had would be sufficient that we could get through this budget year and then see if our next budget year provides an opportunity to restore this program back to where it was. This program is primarily focused on helping small rural communities across the state of Nevada with kind of urban renewal, urban redevelopment projects. And it's run by Patty Herzog of our agency, who also leads our CDBG grant programs for rural Nevada. And so if there's an office for rural development kind of anywhere in the state, it is here. And we'd be glad to, Madam Chair, when we got ready for this, we realized that neither me, my two deputies, or our budget officer had ever presented the GOAD budget. So we actually had no experience beyond a discussion in Lou's Diner as to how to proceed. So we appreciate your patience with us today, because it's our first rodeo for all four of us.
Well, you're doing fine. You're halfway to a buckle. So
all right, great. Well, with that, we'd be glad to answer questions about this.
Okay, and we'll call up the budgets as we have them kind of in our priorities.
Okay, sure.
So thank you very much, Director Brown. And I know you have a number of people on standby to answer any questions that we might have. So we'll go ahead and start with the Nevada Main Street budget. We appreciate your brief but yet overarching presentation on GOAD in general. So with that, I believe Ms. Peters wanted to open it up with some questions, and we'll go from there. So Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Chair. I love this program, having grown up in some of our rural communities that are Main Street communities. This is a cool program. But I did have a couple of clarifying questions as to this current budget we're reviewing. Can you just go over what benefits the agency expects as a result of providing ongoing support for the Nevada Main Street program?
Let me just say, I was involved in revitalization of a neighborhood in Alexandria, Virginia, Mount Vernon Avenue, back in the 90s. I was president of the Delray Citizens Association. And, getting out on the ground and working with local merchants, local government offices to enhance just the basic physical appearance, the streetscape of an area does so much to just kind of help the economic vitality. When I started that project in the 90s, it was a drug dealer infested neighborhood. Today, it's one of the hottest neighborhoods in Northern Virginia. And, I think this has just been a great program inspired by a former legislator to kind of help our rural communities, help our tourism base. Tourism is obviously a very important part of the rural economy, and just celebrating the heritage, the 19th and 20th century heritage that we have out there. And Patty can probably describe it in more detail. And my agency, for the first time, has actually produced an annual report where we have summarized all of this. Patty, do you want to say a few words to that?
Thank you, Director Brown and Assemblywoman Peters, for your question. My name is Patty Herzog, for the record. To your question about programming for Main Street programs, we have a contract with the National Main Street Association to provide training and support for Main Street communities within the state. We will maintain that contract with National Main Street Program. And as well, we will continue our revitalization grants that we offered. We won't be able to offer the same level of funding. Last fiscal year, we did $150,000 in grants to communities. We will be looking at a reduction, and approximately $65,000 of that will be used for grants in the next biennium.
Madam Chair, Michael Brown, for the record, and Assemblywoman, I would just say we share your enthusiasm for this, and we hope as times return to normal, the activity in this area will return to normal.
Ms. Peters, did you have a follow-up?
I do. Thank you. And thank you for that discussion. Excuse me. Can you go into additional detail on the Main Street grant projects and the direct assistance that the agency anticipates to provide to Main Street communities in the upcoming biennium?
Yeah, I'll defer to Patty on that, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty Herzog, for the record again. We will offer the same revitalization grants that we offered last time. Some examples of the program grants that were distributed this time around. Out in White Pine County, there was a grant to help during the pandemic to spotlight Main Street businesses and help drive safe traffic to support those downtown Main Street businesses. That was very successful. In Gardnerville, our only national accredited program in the state, they redid a brochure of their Main Street program that hadn't been updated for a number of years. And in our urban program in the city of Reno, we were able to offer a $50,000 grant to help with the beautification of the ReTrack project. In that project, they were leveraging an EDA grant for up to $200,000 plus in that project. And the Nevada Main Street program was proud to support that project with a $50,000 grant.
And Madam Chair and Assemblywoman Peters, let me say, Patty's staff, while our activity on the Main Street program has been reduced, she has been spending considerable time administering, I think, 3 CDBG CARES Act grants that have come to us. And so the staff has been very busy in this area. But as an example, I'm in an office today, but I have largely worked from home for the last year, as has almost nearly all the staff. The ability to just get out and about has been severely constrained. The governor and I were supposed to make a trip to Ely 1 year ago, I think this week, and that was canceled because of the pandemic. And, we need the ability to go out and about.
Director and Chair, if I may, also during the pandemic, since we haven't been able to travel in almost a year now, as Director Brown had mentioned, what we've done is pivoted to Zoom meetings like we're having today. And we have those twice a month with all the Main Street programs in the state, as well as the partner that were listed on the slide that Director Brown shared. I'm very proud of those partners with Nevada Outdoor Recreation, the Travel Nevada Group, and the State Historic Preservation Office in particular. We've also had some nonprofits join those calls, and that includes the Nevada Preservation Foundation and also the Glenn Center. This has been a great way for our Main Street communities to connect among themselves, and also to hear about all the great programs with other agencies to support their work and efforts.
Follow up real quick, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Assemblywoman Peters, I have 3 people in the queue also, so if you'd make it real brief, and then we'll go to the other folks. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to come up to the upcoming biennium. Do we expect to see additional partners coming into the programs and accessing these grant opportunities? Or are we looking at kind of the same programs just going into a new phase?
This is Patty Herzog for the record. To answer your question, the partners do not receive the grant funding. It's the communities that receive that. The partners are there to support and share the programs that they offer. So there's that communication to and service to the local communities. We will continue to offer the revitalization grants as we have in the past. They just will be funded at lower levels.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Peters. So I guess one of the questions I have before I move to the other folks is, The amounts were not fully expended recently, and I understand in the last year, there's been a problem because of COVID. We get that. That's kind of going to be our standard boilerplate, why it happened this year. But in the previous year also, there were some issues with monies not being fully expended. Could you expand upon that, please?
Thank you, Chair Carlton. This is Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you for your question. What we're looking at with the Main Street program, we spent a lot of focus since the 2019 legislature in growing the program and bringing communities on board. With that, we're a grassroots organization. Most of these communities are run with volunteer staffs. And so it is difficult for them to expend funds. So what we determined was to give communities a longer amount of time to expend those funds and do larger grants. So we gave communities a year to work on those grants. They will have their funds expended by June 30th of this year. So I think that's all I have to say.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much. So,
Madam Chair, I can add that I met with Rural Caucus on Friday, and I said that we have these funds in CDBG and other programs, and that I may need them to tap the shoulders of some city council and municipal leaders to help us get this money onto the street, because this money does create jobs.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. So with that, Chair Brooks?
Does this Main Street program apply to beautiful rural Nevada main streets, even if their main street is spelled with an E, M-A-I-N-E?
Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you for your comment. Yes, particularly if they have an E. Out in Fallon, their Main Street program, their Main Street has an E at the end, and we like to say the E stands for everyone.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Okay, yes, it's Monday morning. Hello. All right, Dr. Titus, your question, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that question, Senator Brooks, as that's in my district and they've done it there. My question is following up on what Madam Chair was asking regarding the numbers and the carryover. And I see that, and I couldn't find it in the bigger volume, the breakdown of where this money was actually spent. And it would be nice perhaps to get us all some pictures of what before and afters, some success stories on where this money was used and what it looks like. I drive through downtown Gardnerville every day, and it is a very unique and very impressive downtown. But I know it was used in Las Vegas area and other areas, and I know that this was a previous Assemblywoman Heidi Swanks, very important to her, and I'm pleased to see that it's continuing. The question is, how many applicants have you actually had? I see that you list there were 6 Main Street grants for 5 different communities, but there's still money on the table. Were there grant applications out there that weren't fulfilled? And backing also what Director Brown, Michael Brown said, indeed, I was at the Rural Caucus meeting and he did bring this up. And I'm just a little concerned that, number one, I want to see some, better documentation of pre and post and the success stories. Number two, are we leaving any communities that have applied, haven't gotten the money? Because I feel that this is a worthy program and I'm concerned that it's not being fulfilled.
Ms. Herzog?
Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you for your question, Assemblywoman Titus. Yes, I understand the concern. There is an eligibility requirement in order to apply for a Main Street grant. We ask that communities be at the affiliate levels, designated program and above. So not all of the exploring programs were eligible to apply for grant funding. So that's why you see 6 communities could apply for those grants. So $150,000 was allocated in grants directly to communities, and they have up to a year to use those funds. And that's why we're seeing the delay in what the budget shows is being expended versus what's out there. So 150,000 has gone out to communities for that. And the purpose of this program too is we do have that National Main Street contract to provide service as far as training for our Main Street communities. The rest of that money, as much as possible, goes directly to service to the communities for their projects. Your point about pictures and projects, as the groups are working on that, we will definitely get that information to you. And also there is a grant synopsis that we can share that provides a description and amounts of grants awarded.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, if I might follow up, Madam Chair. Did you tell me answer the question on how many applicants there were, whether they qualified or not? How many applications did you have for this funds?
I believe for this grant cycle, we had 7 applications from eligible communities and 6 were awarded.
Okay. And can you tell me how much federal dollars, are we leaving any federal dollars on the table in this program?
No, this is strictly state funded program. This isn't a federally funded program.
All right. It's my impression that if they can do some matching funds and we donate to them and then they can apply for some other federal funds, is that not correct?
This funding can be used to match federal grants, as the Downtown Reno Partnership did in applying for an EDA grant.
Okay, great. Thank you for the questions, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Dr. Titus. So, Mr. Levitt, you had a question?
I apologize, Madam Chair. Were you calling on me?
Yes. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just, I actually, Madam Chair asked my question just in regards to the carryover balance, and Dr. Titus had reiterated that point. And just kind of following up on Dr. Titus's second point, you'd mentioned success, that a certain program was a success. How is that success measured? What does that success look like?
I believe you're on mute.
Thank you. Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you for your question, Assemblyman Levitt. We apply success measures to how the community is maintaining. We keep the statistics from National Main Street on number of businesses in a downtown development district. I will point again to the fact that this is a grassroots effort and community-led process, so the community can determine what those metrics are. At the state level, we're looking at how successful they are in leveraging total project costs for the grant awards that they receive, and also those metrics with downtown business districts.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I believe I have Ms. Miller next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just get back, just so I have a better understanding, is, and this is a two-part question. First, which types of communities, I know that downtown Reno receives some funding, but do our communities in the urban core in Clark County also qualify, such as the Hunt Ridge community or historic West Side? And also you mentioned that there were 7 communities that applied, but only 6 were awarded. Can you tell us who was that 7th community that applied and why were they denied?
Thank you for your question. This is Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman Miller. I can get that information to you. I'm sorry, I can't pull that off the top of my head right now, but I will provide that information to you on the one community that did not receive the grant funding. Thank you for that question. We do have Southern Nevada programs in the Main Street program, specifically Mesquite, Boulder City, and the city of Henderson have been involved. they're at the exploring level at Boulder City and in the city of Henderson. To those core urban areas that you were talking about in Las Vegas. Early in the program, when I started at GoEd, I did meet with some leaders in that area. I'm not one for excuses. I'm sorry, with the lack of ability to travel and connect with those groups, it's been very difficult to find a grassroots leader to take on program development there.
Thank you for that. So are there no funds in Las Vegas or in Clark County right now? Besides, you mentioned Boulder City and Laughlin and Mesquite are considering or planning, but is there no funds going into Southern Nevada?
Currently, there are no grants from programs in Southern Nevada. That being because Henderson and Boulder City are exploring programs and didn't meet the minimum requirement level in order to apply for grant funding at the time, which was like a year ago. And when you mentioned Mesquite, that made my memory jog there. Mesquite was the one community that did not receive grant funding. Because the project was it was deemed to be the funding level that they were requesting was for a study, and we were looking for more direct project. Sorry for that. I hope that answers your question.
Ready? Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and believe the last question on this item will be from Senator Severs-Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so you mentioned that a number of the communities were not eligible because they were at the Explorer program versus, I can't remember if it was associate program. So that's one question. And then you also mentioned that the Downtown Reno Partnership was able to leverage their grant funds for federal funds. So a couple things, how do you go from Explorer to associate? And then as far as, are you encouraging, and is that part of your application to see what type of funds they can, how they can use these dollars to leverage more dollars? I think you mentioned that, but not specifically around federal dollars. Thank you.
Again, Patty Herzog for the record. Thank you for your question, Senator Ganser. Yes, we would love to see communities leverage their funding, whether they're successful or not in doing that for federal grants or other grant programs within the state. The city of Reno may not be successful in getting that EDA grant, but it doesn't mean that that project will not be funded with those dollars. They're working very closely with the city of Reno on the Retrack Beautification Project. So that funding will be used for the intended project costs, but they were trying to leverage that for a little additional work on that project.
Okay, and then circling back to the question about, and if you're an Explorer program, you're not eligible for a grant, but you are, it sounded like at maybe the associate level. And how do you become an associate versus an Explorer?
Thank you for your question, Patty Herzog, for the record again. At the associate level there, you have a director for that program and you have a board that's established. The exploring level allows any community to be a part of the program and learn and get the training, attend the National Main Street Conference, connect with other communities across the country who are also working on this. But the minimum level that we felt in our office for funding projects would require support from the local community in the form of having an established board and a director for their program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evers. Appreciate that. I believe all the questions have been asked on this program. Happy to see it actually have a budget number now. We're moving forward and addressing these issues. So with that, I believe the next on my list budget to discuss is budget number 1526, Director Brown.
Oh, yes, 1526 is essentially the operating budget for GOAD with most of the staff and the general administrative overhead to kind of run the operation. It also includes the grants to our regional development authorities. We have 7 regional development authorities in partnership with the state. For those of you that weren't here when GOAD was created, the economic development system before GOAD was a loose confederation of economic development authorities across the state. And when they set the goals out for GOAD, the first was to regionalize, unify, and diversify. And the unify part was creating the RDAs, the 2 most well-known, or the 3 most well-known, Rob Hooper here in the Carson City area, Mike Kazmierski in Reno, and Jonas Peterson in Southern Nevada. But we also have folks deeper in the rurals that are managing those RDAs, and those are 501c6s with state support. There's a state charter where they have reporting obligations to us. We've had one position that's been associated with the agency but never filled. This budget eliminates that position going forward, and so, like I say, this is the basic general administrative overhead account for the agency.
All right, thank you, Director Brown. I'm going to open it up to questions. I have Senator Brooks with the first question, and he'll be followed up by Ms. Benitez Thompson. So, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair Carlton, and thank you, Director Brown, and for your whole team today for showing up and helping us out. I've got, I have several questions, but I'll start with, if you could please describe the implications of the reduced grants to the regional development authorities and on the achieving your goals, and also how that distribution across the state was established, with an understanding that decades of economic development money spent in northern and central Nevada have worked out very well for them, and we saw that through this pandemic, and we have the least amount of diversification of any state in the entire country in southern Nevada. With that, through that lens, if you could explain to me how your budget implications impact your operations, as well as the distribution of that money.
Thank you, Senator Michael Brown, for the record, Madam Chair and Senator. 2 very good questions, and I want to start with the second one first, if you don't mind. And what I've seen when my little elevator speech about Nevada right now is that Northern Nevada was very successful when it landed the Tesla, Panasonic, and the industrial park there. And right now it's growth on growth. And Mike Kazmierski and his team and the community responded to that challenge. Recovery hinges on our ability to fix cracks in our economic framework, and a great effort was undertaken there. Rural Nevada, as you well know, is ripe for energy investment, lithium investment, and rural Nevada leaders I encourage to focus in on broadband and bringing the mining vendor chain to rural Nevada. Southern Nevada is a greater challenge. It was much more biased towards hospitality and much more biased towards entertainment, had a robust global industry. And, if you think about it, the total employment at Tesla Panasonic would be equal, it would take 5 of those to equal 1 MGM. So, you get into really different proportions when you're in Southern Nevada. What I'm finding right now is that we're getting calls from companies that are interested in coming to Nevada. They want to be in the Pacific time zone. They don't want to be in California. We have Californians that want to come over onto this side. It's a matter of whether we have the land and the infrastructure and the rail and the trucking and all of the little boring things that constitute economic development, and whether all of that can come together. And so Betsy Fretwell, who leads LVGA, and I have had some pretty robust discussions about how we focus in on the opportunities coming to us now. And I'm trying to look through the windshield, not into the rearview mirror on these matters. And, the struggle with company towns, whether it be a mining town or an entertainment town, is that they tend to consume, they tend to compete heavily for the workforce. So you need to build the strong workforce. You need to have the infrastructure and everything in place for those opportunities. And so going forward, what you're going to see is my office spending considerable time on matters in Southern Nevada. I have now started a monthly meeting with local government officials down there, which was not done before, where we just troubleshoot the issues. How do we untangle some of the infrastructure issues so that we can further diversify Southern Nevada? And you'll see us spending a lot of time there. As to the budgets, as these were put together, I'll let Bob Potts perhaps explain that. He kind of manages this relationship, but these in having to take the spending reductions, as I learned in the private sector, when you hit a bad patch of road and you hit a period of austerity, you have to make cuts quickly with the information you have at hand. RDAs absorb the budget reductions we put in last year, and we moved forward. Secretary Rumsfeld said, you go to war with the army you have. And that's what we're trying to do now as we move into the recovery stage. Not the most ideal situation, but I understand the austerity that faces Nevada. But what I can tell you is with Southern Nevada being the economic engine of this state, it is the area where I will be spending a considerable amount of my time trying to put the pieces in place to diversify that economy. And Bob, if you want to say a few words practically about how the budgets work.
Sure, absolutely. For the record, Bob Potts, I'm Deputy Director at GOED. Senator Brooks, thanks for the question. So figuring out how to slice up the RDA grant pie, as always, we've worked through that on a number of different iterations. Obviously we work very closely with thinking about a redistricting type formula based on populations and jobs. But if you look at it just like that, you barely give the rurals enough to survive. So the way that they're funded is we have a baseline funding for each of the counties. Prior to the cuts, it was $55,000 a county. That was enough to get them started. But the second reason we wanted to go down that road is it encourages counties to work together and build regional economic development authorities. If you think about how economies work, they work as regions. They don't necessarily work based on political boundaries. So for those two reasons, if you can get them to couple up, if you can get two counties together, that gives you 55,000. If you don't have the population base to get you there, that gives you enough to get an executive director for regional development authorities, so you can actually get some economic development done in some of these rural regions. Okay, so anything above that 52,000, then we go to a strict redistricting formula. So thinking about population, it's based on population, and so Clark County gets the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance by far and away gets the largest proportion, followed by EDON. Then NNBA comes in there, and NNRDAs. So that's kind of how the funding works. Hope that answers your question, Senator Brooks.
That does answer my question, and I mean, just looking at the numbers, it's not proportional to the population, but the rationale that you use, Mr. Potts, makes a ton of sense. So I appreciate that. Madam Chair, can I follow up on that?
Sure, go ahead.
That position that you're eliminating, where is that and what does that position, what would that position have done?
My understanding of this position is it was created after Tesla, and it was more of a special assistant kind of position, and it was never filled. It's never had an incumbent.
Thank you.
Yeah. Madam Chair and Senator Michael Brown, if I could just say one more thing about the challenge in Southern Nevada. This is a personal observation, both when I was B&I director and now that I'm GOED director, is I have probably shown up a half dozen times at meetings with officials in Southern Nevada, and I've gotten this reaction of the states come to the meeting. And I gathered that it wasn't common that Southern Nevadans tended to look to local government first and foremost, and weren't accustomed to state officials showing up with an interest. I came to an RDA advisory committee meeting of about 50 people just before the pandemic, and the reaction was, the state is here. I don't mind it at all, but and that's why I've started this direct discussion with the 4 local governments in Southern Nevada on these matters.
Okay, thank you. Senator, any follow-up? If not, I can go ahead and go to Ms. Benitez-Thompson. You're good? Okay. Ms. Benitez-Thompson.
Thank you so much for the questions, Chair. I appreciate it. So one question I had is, and thank you for your presentation, Mr. Brown. So I see the amount of expenditures for grants to the development authorities. I think if my recollection is correct, that in your budget on state trade and the STEP program, which are federal dollars, but then the inner city economic development dollars, are those program dollars pushed down to the RDA as well, or are those held at GoEd and your staff uses those dollars?
Madam Chair and Leader, I stand to be corrected by my staff, but I believe those are all administered here.
I'm sorry, I missed that last piece.
I stand to be corrected by my staff, but I believe we administered them here at GoEd.
Okay, so those are held there. Those aren't, I shouldn't think of those additional dollars put into the RDAs. Okay, that helps as a clarifying question. I appreciate that. And then, Madam Chair, can I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead. Sure.
Thank you so much. So I see that we have in budget E68, I'm sorry, in E125, an addition of $612,000, but then in budget E680, a reduction of 441 and thereabouts. So I guess I was trying to figure out where we settle with those two budgets and those grants.
Madam Chair and Leader, I'll turn to Leandra to answer that. I believe this is a result of just how our budgeting system works. Leandra?
So if I'm correct, then it looks to be like we end up with about, gosh, my arithmetic is bad, but $250,000-ish, but I'll let staff correct me if I'm putting something horribly inaccurate on the record.
Madam Chair and Assemblywoman, I need to do the same on this. Leandra, our budget person, I think is online. She might be able to clarify that.
Good morning. Leandra Diosa, Director of Administration for the record. So after those two decision units, one that increases the grants to the RDAs and the other one that reduces the grants, we'll end up with $2.5 million in each year of the fiscal year.
At 2.5 each year. Thank you so much. And I think that's where I'm gonna, those were mine. I just had some clarifying questions on some of these. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair and some Leader, the other thing I would also say is, it's chartered as 501c6s, but they hadn't met as a group. And I convened before the pandemic, seems like it's what I always say now, before the pandemic, we actually convened, I think it was the first time in 5 years that everyone had met as one. And I convened that meeting in the Gwynn room of the Capitol, and we met for an entire day working on economic development matters. But I did it in the Gwynn room specifically because I just wanted everyone to understand that at its core, we're all government, or we're an extension of government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to get some clarifying questions on the record, Chair, and then I'll check back with you on some kind of programmatic stuff, but I wanted to be sensitive about time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benitez-Thompson. I do have 3 other folks who do have questions, so that if they would each ask their question, I believe I will go to Senator Kickeffer next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Director Brown, for joining us this morning. You'd said a couple times, here you talked a couple times about the sort of transformative impact that the Panasonic project had on the overall economic development efforts in Northern Nevada. And that success in terms of diversification. Southern Nevada is just a much larger ship to turn, right, when it comes to diversifying our economy. And so, we tried with the Faraday project to lure one of those same type of transformative projects to Southern Nevada. Unfortunately, that one didn't work out. It's okay if we roll the dice sometimes. But I'm curious as to whether in this discussion about RDAs, whether it is still the mission of your office and the governor to work on attracting those types of major transformative projects, or whether we're still working on, or whether at this point we're working on sort of base infrastructure surrounding economic. Maybe it's all.
Thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. That's a very good question. At one side, we have kind of these base issues. You know, Company X needs a power line approved by BLM. Can we get the governor to phone the BLM to kind of get this power line? Can we get Senator Cortez Masto, the troubleshooting? Business has basically been frozen up, obviously, and scrambling to deal with the challenges of the pandemic. But what I will tell you, since the start of the year, both LVGEA, EDON, and GOET have received inquiries from very serious corporations that are looking at how they're situated. They either have manufacturing abroad, they want to bring back to the United States. They might have manufacturing in California that they want to consolidate somewhere. You might have a company that is logistically challenged in Columbus, hypothetically, in Columbus, Ohio, that realizes just-in-time inventory did not work for them, and with the switch to e-commerce. And McKinsey, the consulting firm McKinsey, put out something about 2 weeks ago that quantified this, and it said that, you know, it said that basically we will look at our economy with 21 being a pivot year, and that we will refer to this as pre-pandemic and post-pandemic economies. And so what we expect to see is an onshoring of American manufacturing, a sorting out of within the private sector of logistics and things of that nature. And so we are having those discussions more than at any point in my short tenure here, and more than in the last 2 years. And the RDAs have effectively, you know, are really at the front line of all this. Now, on the recruitment side, business intelligence, you know, this is a difficult period to understand what companies are trying to do. But I will tell you right now, our plate is full with companies that want to talk to us and work through some of these issues so that we can prepare competitive proposals. And I say that I really want to emphasize, this is a very competitive process, and Utah and Arizona are well positioned in the Western United States. And so what I'm trying to do as a coach maybe is to get Nevada as competitive as possible to compete in that arena. I hope that answers your question. And I'd be glad to submit this McKinsey article for the record, because I thought it really summarized. There was a lot of hype in the fall, but this is the first time where what I'm experiencing aligns with what the advisors are saying. This is the period of time it has started.
I appreciate that. I think that, you know, as we try to move forward and diversify, particularly in Southern Nevada, it should be in everything on the table, or sort of option for us, and using all the tools that are at our disposal to work with those companies that are looking to onshore American manufacturing, whatever it might be, as all of the items that you described. So I appreciate that, and if there's anything we can do.
Thanks, Madam Chair and Senator Michael Brown, for the record. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. This is the moment. I will also say that this was a small world. There are specialized real estate agents called site selectors that are often retained by these companies. And so they've already done the sort when they've called us, you know, and want a request for information and asked us to prepare a proposal. And my staff's working on about 4 or 5 different proposals right now, along with LVGEA and EDON staff. And like I say, it is like this now with our regional development authorities. It's almost a real time, you know, pick up the phone and call and work as one holistic unit.
Thank you very much. I believe I have Ms. Tolles for a question and Ms. Ganzert for a comment. So I'll go to the question first. Ms. Tolles.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, for the comments in particular about making sure that we diversify our economy across the whole state. We've certainly seen the benefits of that up in Northern Nevada. I just had a couple quick clarifying questions. I see here that we have some funds that are going to be utilized for consulting services and economic analysis, the tune of in decision unit E-125 for $153,000. And I just wanted to get a better clarification of what that's going to be used for, and in particular in the backdrop of the fact that I know in IFC in September, we approved some CARES Act funding for consulting services and economic analysis, almost 1.1 million of CARES Act for the economic response plan, and which we supported, and then 1.2 million for the Nevada labor certification plan and workforce skills matching platform. So just wanted to get an idea of what these new consulting services that we're asking for in this budget, how that's differing from what we approved during the interim.
And thank you, Assemblywoman and Madam Chair. When I came over here, the term I like to use, the Easter egg that I found when I got here, was the analytical team that Bob Potts leads and our relations with John Restrepo and some of the other economic consultants in the state, because we have been able to put a policy foundation to a lot of what GOED does. And those funds, and Bob Potts can elaborate, are basically to support the one-off spot economic analysis that we need to create for either special projects or areas where we need deeper knowledge. And I'll let Bob Potts explain that.
Thank you, Michael. For the record, again, Bob Potts. So I want to go back a little bit to Senator Keycapper's earlier question, or talk about the RDAs. We have an amazingly close relationship with the RDAs right now. Regular weekly calls, or every other week right now, really coordinating, making sure during this recovery and resiliency point, to the point that he made about it takes a long term for diversification, especially with a large economy like Southern Nevada. It does take a long time, and change doesn't happen. I often think about economic development. I'm just celebrating my 9th year with working in this agency. And economic development is synonymous with change. And change, nobody likes change very much unless they need it. And we're at a place now where change is critically important, once again, as we deal with the pro-cyclical nature of Southern Nevada's economy. Ways that gets done is if you have a landing spot for the companies that Michael was talking about that we have in the queue right now. We need to have the right infrastructure. We need to have the right workforce. We create opportunities for dislocated workers. And so we work very closely with the training programs, training providers, educational institutions across the board. And with that, I will maybe getting back to Assemblywoman Toles' question. I'm going to refer our Workforce Development Director, Stacy Bostwick. She's on the call here too, and she can give you some stats as where things currently stand with the Skills Match platform, with labor certification study, and where we are as far as pushing forward this qualified workforce that we need. I often say this: is it great companies that create a great workforce, or is it a great workforce that attracts great companies? And the answer to both those questions is yes. And so we are intimately involved at a whole host of levels on the workforce side of things. But I'll leave it there and let Stacy give you a little feedback of where we stand with those two platforms that we use CD dollars for.
Good morning, Stacy Foster for the record. Just wanted to share a couple of things in relation to our skills match efforts. We shared a bunch of information about how this has gone out and launched. We had several training programs or sessions with partners who are really working with folks on the front line. And so we're really excited about those. We've had nearly 2,000 unique visitors in Nevada use this system. And I think the metric for me that's probably the most meaningful is that somewhere around 70 to 80%, so about 13 to 1,400 of those individuals are using that platform to job search. And so that tool basically is helping individuals identify their skills and identify job opportunities that they can use those skills at where there are actual job opportunities at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I follow up?
Yes, brief, please.
Thank you for those stats. I guess I still didn't hear the answer to the question that how we use the rough 2.3 million that we authorized through IFC in September. So thank you for the update on that. But how this budget request for for this biennium of 153 will be used.
Let me explain. I'm sorry, Michael Brown for the record. So when that came through, that was a joint effort between us and the treasurer and efforts to get ready to stand up programs in support of the state infrastructure bank. What you have here is basically the in-house account for in-house research where we need extra support from a John Restrepo or a Jeremy Aguera or someone like that to help with ongoing day-to-day business here.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, so with that, I have Ms. Severs-Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Brown and your staff for all the work that you're doing. I appreciated that you started out with a map and kind of showed our relative diversification. And as Senator Kekeffer and others have pointed out, Southern Nevada is the ship we need to try to right because we're doing pretty well in a lot of other areas. And it's with the pandemic and just prior to the pandemic, you and I talked recently, you were working on a new strategic plan because I think it's important that even during robust times that we're working on a strategic plan to figure out what our advantages are, where we have deficits, so that we can create a more diversified workforce and bring other businesses in. So my question is, how's it going now with an updated the strategic plan? And are you working both on identifying workforce needs and also infrastructure needs? Because in our conversation that we had offline, it sounded like infrastructure is really driving some of the decisions that are being made by these organizations, whether to come to Nevada or not.
Yes, thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. Quickly, yes, we had started a conventional economic development planning process before the pandemic. As we got into the pandemic and we looked back at what pandemics do to economies and we looked at the 1918 experience, we realized that the world was going to be very different and looking backwards was not going to be much of help. And so I actually asked SRI to provide ongoing, SRI International had been retained to help on this, ongoing support for our office and the governor's office in providing economic advice and helping us make application for federal dollars. Bob Potts assembled a statewide team of all the state economists that met every Thursday with support from SRI as we attempted to give policy options to leadership. And then they provided help with us on relief and encouraged us on federal funding in that area. And then finally, we turned to them in the fall and say, we need a resiliency plan. We need something that's going to carry us for about 18 months as we go through this very turbulent water and get to where we need to be, where we could then restore some kind of more conventional planning. And so they presented us with a report that we have filed with this committee. That's the resiliency plan. Some of the ideas that were in there were included in the state of the state and constitute what this agency will be focusing on going forward. On the workforce side, as you know, the governor is moving Owen over to Dieter and has recently appointed the leader of Owen. And we have a lot of collaboration with that and look forward to engaging on the workforce issues.
Thank you. And then we have the new infrastructure, the dollars that are set aside. So, please let us know because it does sound like that is what's holding some companies back from moving here. It's both the workforce, but it's also the infrastructure. And if there's a way that we can identify that and leverage our dollars for federal dollars, especially, it sounds like there's going to be a pretty significant push down from the federal level to the state so that we take every opportunity to really reset what we have foundationally in certain areas of the state. And again, Clark County, I think that's the one that's been hardest to move. Whatever help we can provide you,
Senator, Madam Chair, Michael Brown for the record. Infrastructure, yes, on two sides. One, the governor's recommended funding and to build out the infrastructure bank. Zach Conine, my great partner in so many issues now. I'm so pleased to be working with him. We'll be working on that. But then internally, I grew frustrated with the number of calls I would get about power lines and things like that and off ramps. And I said to Chris Sanchez, can you put a little group of Southern Nevada leaders together at the deputy level and try to sort out, the things that are entangled. And so he, over the next 60 days, is going to be working on that so that I understand what needs to be fixed. And then hopefully if there's more federal relief in this area, we'll be well prepared.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Severs-Ganser. Not seeing anyone else wishing to be recognized at this time. I think we've pretty much ask the questions that I had.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Benitez Thompson?
Thank you so much. And it's just a comment for the record, but I see the reduction in travel, which makes sense right now. I just want to put it on the record that in the past there has been some tension between the amount of the international travel that staff and folks would take, and then kind of showing that resulted in meaningful investments back in Nevada. And so I know the reduction is less, but as we start to travel, I would just hope that those kinds of questions and conversations always continue on in this committee. We've had, a great document that Go had produced for us a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, about the travel, the Irelands, the Africas, the Polands, all these international trips that staff were on. And then the conversation about now what did this actually produce? And so I just hope that this committee continues to ask those kinds of questions, so we always make sure that a dollar invested can as much as possible be a dollar realized for work product back in Nevada.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benitez Thompson. I guess the only comment that I would have, and thank you committee members very much for all of your great questions. But Mr. Brown, and to those of your folks, I know you could probably guess what I'm about to say is, thank you for reaching out. We do want to create more jobs, but I really don't want to see us working towards jobs that end up on our list of employees who receive a huge amount of Medicaid. So I know that you'll be very cognizant of the fact that it's not just any company. We do want companies here, but we want companies that will do the best for the folks of Nevada and not lay the burden of their health care on the state with Medicaid or other safety net providers being there to provide part of the benefit package for those employees. And I know you will always keep that in the back of your mind, but I feel it's necessary that we always have that in the record as part of the conversation. So thank you very much for all the work that your team is doing.
Madam Chair, I appreciate you saying that. That is something the governor and I had very long discussions about. And, we are trying to set the bar higher. We are trying to encourage these companies to bring their proposals forward, but tell us also about your corporate social responsibility program. Our application now includes questions about corporate social responsibility, hiring, diversity, veterans of that matter. It's a question, do you want when I was in the mining business, it was like you could produce a lot of ounces or you could produce a number of ounces profitably. And, we need, if we're going to be granting incentives and abatements, we need to make sure that those are quality jobs on the other side. The governor feels strongly about this. And I have heard the message from the committee and will endeavor to do so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. So with that, I believe we can move on to our next budget item, which we would like to discuss, which is budget number 1527, the Nevada Film Office. If you'd like to give us a very brief overview, and then Senator Dennis has a couple of questions on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Nevada Film Office. It's been a challenge this year. I'll say Nevada Film Office is funded through the tourism from the tourism tax, the Department of Tourism on the tourism tax, and yet we've had a really good year of supporting television programs, Lifetime Christmas movies, things, reality shows that have been going on in the background during this difficult year. However, it has been a challenge to keep the little office whole. Chris Sanchez, who oversees it, worked with Eric, who runs it, and we made a series of general administrative overhead reductions. We closed their physical office and consolidated them to save rental money with the PTAC office. We've done about every cost measure we can. And fortunately, Congress authorized in the CARES Act some provisions that allowed us to use some CARES Act dollars for the promotion of tourism. But it has been a struggle to keep the film office operating. I think based on what Leandra's told me, that we can make it to the end of this fiscal year, but it has been a struggle. And it comes at a time where we believe, and this gets back to Senator Kiekeffer's inquiry, where there is considerable disruption going on in the Hollywood community, and we are getting inquiries from individuals that are interested in coming to Southern Nevada, where a movie star could fly over here, do a scene, and fly back and have dinner with her family in the same night, or take the Brightline train at some point back and forth. The struggle we have with film is we actually, despite being this global entertainment capital of the world, we don't have a film studio in Southern Nevada. We have some kind of a tent, I think, somewhere behind Caesars, but we don't have a production studio in Southern Nevada. And when I get to these issues of infrastructure, what keeps us from diversifying? Not having that kind of a private sector facility is a major detriment to us. I think film is one where we have opportunities, but I will also say that this is an industry where there's fierce competition from Georgia, Vancouver, Toronto, New Mexico. You either play, you have to go to the table prepared to play. You can't be timid about it. And so it's an area that Eric and Chris have spent a lot of time looking at this past year, and is actually an area that I think offers great potential. And we have the irony of trying to sustain pay our film office employees at this time. So.
Thank you, Director. We understand the challenge. I know there were a lot of folks that did want to come here, unfortunately, when the strip was shut down, because they got the opportunity to get the shots that they needed. But after that, there wasn't a lot of interest on different things. So, Senator Dennis, you had some questions.
Thank you, and you kind of alluded to them already, Director Brown. You've got a reduced budget this year, and your advertising budget is less. How are you kind of alluded to this already, but are you going to be able to be able to continue doing the work that you're doing, especially with all the interest that there is now in coming to Nevada to doing, are we going to have the staff to be able to handle that as people want to come here?
Yes, thank you, Senator, Madam Chair. I'm going to be spending a good part of this week on, because I know that there is capital out there that's interested in being deployed here. And I need to see how I can get some folks on the same page so we can have a robust discussion about this. It has been a challenge. Director Scolari at Tourism has been a great help. And we're in regular discussions on what her revenue forecast is to kind of keep the film office running. Yeah. And then the IFC was generous to help us with some CARES Act dollars. It is a week-to-week situation.
So, and what about potential revenue sources to support this in the future? You kind of alluded to that too. Is there opportunities to be able to get some additional revenues to support the office?
I don't know at this point if there are any opportunities. It's an area where I need to spend more time on this month, frankly.
Yeah, I know when we first did the credits way back when, the big thing was to trying to attract people to actually build facilities here so that we could have those ongoing jobs. And hopefully we can do that. So talk a little bit then about you have that directory, the printed directory that you've done for years, and that brings in revenue because you do advertising. But if you're not going to print that and have that advertising revenue, I get doing the online stuff, but how are you going to replace that, or what's the plan for that?
Let me turn to Eric or Chris, and they can answer that more specifically.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. This is Eric Price. I'm the director of the Nevada Film Office. The printed directory is going to go away, and we will continue with the online digital directory. Since we've had both for 10 plus years now. The digital directory has continued to show an increase in activity as more people go on the web and look for resources. By reducing the printed directory, we're going to be saving costs while migrating fully to digital. With the new digital products that we have available, we will be able to use online advertising. So Rather than buying a print ad now, companies will be able to advertise online, and with those online tools, be able to track the effectiveness of their advertising, be able to place more advertising throughout the year, and not be constrained by the limits of a printed book with the deadlines and the printing costs of that. So by going fully digital, yes, we will lose some of the impact of the printed directory, but we will gain a lot of the advantages of reduced costs while giving more options to the people that do choose to advertise, giving them greater flexibility and more opportunity to attract the online customers, in which we're seeing a great increase in the number of people that are using our online directory.
Do you, with all the stuff going on, especially more people watching like Netflix and other things, do you see an interest, I mean, an interest in increasing production and are they interested in coming to Nevada?
We've seen since the pandemic a significant increase in the number of productions and companies that want to relocate to Nevada. We've seen from a production side, companies that specifically came to Nevada as a result of the pandemic, including shows like Shark Tank, CBS's Love Island is a great example. That typically films in Tahiti or Fiji, but they did a full season from the roof of the Cromwell. And I noted that in our presentation that brought in about $15 million of direct expenditures. So since the pandemic, we've seen that people specifically have come to Las Vegas to film, but also as a result of the pandemic, we've seen a greater increase in the number of production companies that want to relocate and land here to open studios here. The environment in California and in Los Angeles continues to be challenging. They're running out of space. They're physically running out of infrastructure space. Southern Nevada is a great opportunity to expand into. They see it as an expansion opportunity, but as Director Brown had mentioned, we quite simply lack the infrastructure for them to do so. And by having proper infrastructure, I believe we will attract even more interest and opportunity. The entertainment industry is a way to diversify our economy that also is a synergistic relationship with the industries that we already have here in Southern Nevada. The ability to create content to gain the attention of the consumer and direct that attention where we want it to go, which is our brands of Las Vegas and Southern Nevada, and our brands of Reno and Tahoe and Northern Nevada. The ability to get their attention through content has never been a greater opportunity than it is now. As a result of the pandemic, we see that more people are consuming more content than ever in human history, and we want to try to capitalize on those opportunities.
Well, and I thank you. And I hope that, I know we're tough times and we have to do some reductions, but I hope that those reductions don't keep you from being able to further look for opportunities to expand the economy and provide jobs through the movie industry. So thank you. That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. Committee members, are there any questions on these items on 1527? I believe they've all been answered, and it is nice to see you going digital with that directory. I believe in the new world, that's the direction that we're going, and that way it can be updated quickly. So as things change in Nevada, we're able to get the information out to folks. So I do appreciate that. So not seeing any other questions on this particular item, I believe we can go ahead and move on to item 1531. And Director Brown, I'm sorry if I skipped over you doing individual presentations on these individual items. I just thought we would have that high-level conversation and then open it up to committee for questions. But if there is anything in particular, I just wanted to make sure you're more than welcome to point it out to the committee. So You've never been shy about that, so I'm not worried about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 1531, this is our part of the workforce program that Stacy leads, the Workforce Innovation Fund, the WIN Fund. We're operating, again, because of the pandemic, with resources that have come to us from Dieter, and Stacy is available to answer any questions in this area and how we're trying to go forward.
Thank you very much. And I believe I have Senator Brooks that wanted to start with the questions on this particular budget item.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Thank you, Dr. Brown and Ms. Bosway. I want to start with just what's an update on some of the outcomes of your existing WIN projects?
Good morning. Thank you for the question, Senator Brooks. This is Stacy Bostwick. I'm the Director for Workforce Development at GoEd. The outcomes that we're required to report, and we include a biennial report. I don't know if it was attached to this budget piece, but that is something that LCB has. We're required to report on information about the number of individuals who have received training. And so since WIN has been in inception, we're just shy of 2,000 individuals who have been supported through the launch of those programs. We're also looking at employment metrics, which the challenge, quite frankly, is that we capture data when we fund the project. And most of what WIN does is fund infrastructure and launch of programs for sustainability. So we have pipelines going forward. So I like to always kind of give the caveat that what we have in terms of metrics is really the tip of the iceberg. So it's kind of the beginning of the success story. So a lot of times when we capture data point in time, it doesn't capture kind of the full spectrum. So right now I can tell you that we've had, over 800, nearly 900 individuals who've already attained employment, and the average wage for that kind of entry into employment, not the subsequent promotions or any of those kinds of details, is over $20 an hour. So I hope that answers your question. If there's more information about the metrics, please do ask.
No, that did. Thank you. And also, if I could follow up, Madam Chair, another question.
Yes, go ahead, Senator, please.
Has the agency not been able to fully expend its general fund appropriations in this account?
Stacey Foster, for the record, thank you for that question. So I think, with respect to this last biennium, there's obviously been a couple of factors in play. The WIN Fund it plays a couple of roles. And one, of course, is it being a tool in terms of the economic development conversation. And so when economic development slows down, you're obviously not using the tool as much as you would like to. And also just there isn't a lot of activity to connect those funds to. So the new workforce programs aren't necessary if there isn't new workforce jobs, for which we don't already have a program within the state. The second piece that I wanted to mention is that, and part of that kind of general pivot that we did was that we had a lot of programs that existed that were providing talent that was very important during the pandemic. And so we did a little bit of a pivot and support with NSHE, and we're able to kind of tap into almost $3 million in coronavirus relief funds to help those programs augment and continue to deliver the needed pipeline. So that was a priority activity. And then I think the last one and is worth mentioning is that the WIN Fund currently in statute has a reversion requirement. So we, instead of being able to carry dollars with continuity for projects, we kind of had this stilted stop and start with the biennium. And so depending on conversations and how they develop with the education and industry partner, we kind of have to manage the timeline based on when they apply, because they're not going to come and ask for dollars right now with 4 months left in the biennium when they have a need in terms of what it takes to build a program that's going to take longer than 4 months, or potentially longer than the money we have maybe on the pot. So we kind of have projects in queue that then have to wait till July 1. And really, we couldn't entertain projects that really need more than 2 years because we don't have that reversion.
And have you been able to take any steps to try to alleviate some of those problems you just identified, so that you can spend more of that allocated money?
Thank you for the question. I think probably the most prominent solution that we're putting forward is that we have a bill on the Senate side that will actually be coming before its first hearing this week to revise that language. We've attempted to revise that language, especially in terms of the reversion, because that really just from a business process and flow has been very challenging in my experience with this for a little over 2 years.
Thank you. And then my final question is, could you discuss some of the workforce development projects that you anticipate funding this biennium?
Stacey Bostrick again for the record. Thank you for the question, Senator Brooks. So we put together a list of things based on industrial development. So we expect, obviously, with the increased pace of economic development activity that Director Brown has referred to, as well as just kind of the priority in terms of being able to access retraining for individuals whose jobs aren't going to come back in this post-pandemic environment, and add that to kind of the industrial developments that we're already seeing. Every industry kind of has its own timeline in terms of industry development. So these are things that have been on our radar for a little while, and now there's really kind of a lot of momentum coming with those. And so a couple of them that we have on our list of expected projects include industrial developments in 9 Esmeralda County. There's a lot of things happening in the mining space in particular in that area. There's a lot of industrial developments, obviously, in Fernley. We work in partnership with a lot of different educational providers, but Western Nevada College in this particular circumstance is expanding their footprint there because of the developments there, and being able to support them in doing that is on our radar. We've had conversations with Great Basin College regarding expanding programs in the Pahrump space, particularly in healthcare. And we are always looking at expanding in terms of providing the right skills and the skills needed by growing or new companies in technology and in advanced manufacturing. So those are on our list as well.
Thank you. I didn't recognize any Clark County projects, but that seems to be a trend this last 20 days.
I should point out we did a project with the Haas Corporation that is going to be in Henderson. I think one of the complexities that we have is that the private sector is on a calendar year, we're on a fiscal year, and our academic partners are on an academic year. So it takes a little bit of juggling.
And thank you, Senator. I guess I'd like, I have a couple of other folks for questions, but I guess I think I need to clarify something with this Senate bill that will be coming forward to deal with reversions. It seems to me, and I may not be remembering correctly, but Wynn was supposed to be looking for the workforce, taking recommendations from industries on what they needed, and getting money to the appropriate training partners. So I guess I'm just a little confused about this reversion thing. And when we look at some of these numbers, when only 40% is used, that's not even 50, that's not even 1 year. And then the 1921 biennium, we're not even going to talk about that because we know what half of that year was like, but still approximately $900,000 out of the $4 million that was approved at the end of the biennium. So I guess we probably are going to need to have a little bit deeper conversation, and hopefully that bill will promulgate that conversation. But you know, the purpose of reversions is if there is money sitting out there that can be used for another purpose, it needs to come back to the state so that it can be reallocated. Having money sit in one spot for too long and not be used doesn't benefit everyone from the state. So it was my impression that this was really more of a get the money to whoever was going to do the training portion of it. So is there something that I'm missing in this reversion discussion?
Chair Carlton, this is Stacey Bostrick for the record. No, I think you're spot on in terms of, you know, what we're looking at. I think the challenge for the reversion that I'll share and is that we haven't been able to support some of projects that have come across our desk because of the timeline that's involved. And so the way that I was kind of trying to describe the WIN fund is that, we aren't there to pay kind of for scholarships per se for people to go through programs, because we have a wealth of funds in the public workforce system to be able to do that. What the WIN fund does, especially with this lens of economic development, is to ensure that there's programs to develop these pipelines for these, industrial developments or economic development. And the reality is that if we don't have new industry, if we don't have new occupations, or if there isn't a change or shift in the technology or the skills needed for those jobs, then WIN doesn't get deployed. And so I don't ever want us not deploying those funds to be looked at as that they're not being used to help or there isn't space, but that means that there are other resources that are meant to do that work are doing that work. And the work that we have in our kind of laser focused space of ensuring that these programs get developed so that people actually have the skills and access to these jobs, isn't necessary at that place. And so I think that's important to know.
This is an area where I would like to have a discussion. We need to get this right. We've got an experience curve now, and I would like to have this discussion with the members of the committee and the staff and because we do need to get this right. And with the new leadership over at Owen, I want to work with you to fix it.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple more questions, and then I think I'll go to. I believe I have a question from Dr. Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think WIN is an important component. We have heard when we want to diversify our economy that we need to have a trained workforce, and so I'm supportive of that concept. I also just a comment and then some questions. Your priorities that you listed, the 5 basic priorities, one of which was health, and then mining, and a skilled workforce that you've had for a number of years. I'm pleased to see that with the potential development projects for 21, 23, you've stayed with those consistency. We know we need skilled workforce. We know we need more healthcare sector. If this pandemic showed nothing else, we know we need to expand our healthcare workforce, and also, the mining skilled jobs, which are all good paying jobs. My questions involves around your statement that so far you've trained, I believe you said 2,000 folks have gone through this program in the past. Is that cumulative since its inception up to today? And then you mentioned that 800 of them were employed. I'm wondering, with this list that you gave us with the potential workforce, the potential ones, from the advanced mechatronics to the Pahrump training program expansion and that whole list that you submitted for $3.5 million, how many bodies will that touch? How many folks will that reach?
Assemblywoman Titus, this is Stacy Bostrick for the record. The short answer is I don't know. We don't know necessarily. I don't think we have the paper in front of us to be able to answer that. And I don't want to put an estimate out there that doesn't accurately kind of reflect. Project scopes are very different from one to the other. We're working with CSN expanding advanced manufacturing right now. It's a $2 million project because it is a massive expansion with also a lot of opportunity in Southern Nevada. And so their goal is to be able to train a minimum of 200 people a year. And then we're working with Western Nevada College right now on a mobile mechatronics lab that really focuses on kind of the rural parts of their community. And so their goals are closer to 25, folks, maybe a semester. So scale in terms of what the industry needs in that space and also what the program is vary significantly. But these are not going to be, I think, small investment programs based on the dollars involved.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
When they apply for these programs, do you not require what their class size will be or what their potential reach is going to be? I mean, we wouldn't want to give $2 million to a program that trains 2 people. I mean, I think is that not part of that requirement?
Assemblywoman Titus, yes, it is. So these are not projects that we have full scopes or applications for. So that's why I can't give you a specific number to those, and we always try to line those up exactly the way that you mentioned. So there isn't a sweet spot. So there isn't a rule in play, whether it's in statute that says, that the cost per can't exceed, but we're looking for what's reasonable, but also what that return on investment is going to look like.
Right, so you do follow those numbers, because I think it's important that we know if we're spending $1 million for this program, but it only trains 10 people, and of those, only 5 get a job. That's a big expense for training 5 folks. So I'd like to see that. I'm sure everybody else, the data that comes out of that when we do have those programs. Then my final question, if I might, Madam Chair, would be, you mentioned that you have $3 million in Corona relief funds, and those had a stop date on those. So I assume that you had to use those up by an X date, and you might want to share that with us. But you also mentioned in your, in our notes anyway, that there was a $2 million sub-grant coming up, and I'm just wondering for the DEETR, is that, that's E125, is that part of a Corona virus relief package that has a stop date? Or so these funds seem to be mixing these federal funds, and I'm wondering how much is just, we're already going to be there based on federal funding, not associated with the CARES Act or any additional funds that we might get. Could you tease that out for me a little bit on where these federal funds are and what they're in?
Michael Brown, Director for the record. We did not receive COVID relief workforce dollars here. NCHI received dollars. We provided subject matter expertise to help them prioritize projects. Those funds weren't here. We had funds that had been appropriated that were swept away to meet the budget reductions that the legislature considered in June. And then to help keep this function going, the GFO arranged for us to be able to tap resources at DEETR to kind of engage in this area as long as it met the federal requirements that are around there. So they weren't as flexible as the general fund dollars that we might have otherwise had. And to show you the complexity of this, we had worked out, after extensive negotiation, a partnership with a manufacturer, a partnership with a community college, and GOAD to bring the money all together. And we took it to the board, I guess in June, I believe. And one of our board members rightfully said, rightfully had the question, in this time of fiscal austerity, should we be spending these dollars? And the board, went back and forth as to whether or not they should be spending these dollars at all. And yet there have been months and months and months of work on this project. But in a time of fiscal austerity, this board member wondered what the priority was. And in the end, the board approved it. And I think that was our last grant of general fund dollars, if I'm not mistaken, Stacy. And then we've been working with the DEETR resources that are there. So, when we see economic recovery and have more resources, we'll have more robust. But I do want to, the area of workforce is an area where with Owen and with others, and as the chair said, we need to sort some of this out and get it right going forward.
Great, thank you. From hearing is that you didn't receive WIN did not receive any direct CARES Act money, but you may have been assisted through some pass-through money that went to DEETR or NCHI that then they were able to maybe give some of that funds to WIN. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, Madam Chair, Leader, there were no CARES Act dollars that came to GOAD in this space. There were resources that DEETR had, I think, through their regular federal programs that we've been able to deploy. We provide subject matter expertise, though, to lots of folks in the workforce area. And Stacy, this is an area where I'm learning, and Stacy's teaching me because she really knows this area. So.
And thank you for the clarification.
And I stand to be corrected if I believe I got that right, Stacy. Yes.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I have Ms. Severs-Gansert next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in looking at some of the potential workforce development projects, you've got some behavioral mental health, social work certificates. You have a program there. And I know all your programs are complicated because you have to be able to partner with the private sector, and then you've got higher ed potentially. And in this case, there seems to be a lot of demand in the school districts because the students are in school part-time or not in school and will be returning to school. So I think there's going to be a huge supply side issue on the behavioral mental health side. And so I wanted, it looks like a pretty small program. So my question is, are you working with the school districts? Are you working with higher ed? Because I think there's going to be a lot of demand in that sector. And there may be opportunities for federal dollars because this will the majority of the behavioral mental health around schools potentially is related to not being in school. So again, it'd be related to COVID. So are you on the forefront of that? Are you the best agency for that? And how do we really bolster those? Because I think there's a significant need in that area.
Thank you for that question, Senator Severs-Gansert. This is Stacy Bostwick for the record. So it's a really great question because it really, I think, help you kind of construct where some of these projects come from, because they can really come at us from a lot of different angles. So obviously industry can bring it to us. It can come from a GoEd kind of project that's come through our pipeline. And in the case of some of our healthcare projects, a lot of that comes, from folks within, the post-secondary space, saying that, we're getting this demand from all of our partners, but we can't meet it. And how can we do that? And then we have a healthcare industry specialist within GoEd. And so some of these have come from those conversations where we don't expect that our funding will be the only resource at the table. And so the dollar amount is kind of an estimate to say where are all the different kind of pieces of the pie that might come in. And in some ways kind of reserving, saying we don't think we'll be able to piece all of this together, but we know that we're going to need some support to address capacity or changes in what needs to happen for that particular training area.
Yeah, I'm just really hopeful that there's work being done. And again, I'm not sure, you're probably a piece of the answer, but the demands are going to be, are growing, I believe. And so, whatever we can do around that as we have children returning to class or going more full-time, I guess, versus part-time. And I think part of it is trying to get students in the queue, right? So you have the demand where we're going to need these folks, but you also have to have the supply of people interested in that. And I do appreciate that you are working on potential projects. So you're queuing some things up, because we're going to need what you do, which is enhance skills and knowledge and retraining in partnership with the private sector work. And just, again, making a note that the behavioral health piece is really important for the state right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Padillas-Thompson, did you have a comment, question?
No, Madam Chair, I'll just echo what you said, that I think we have an opportunity to talk about this program with the bill that's going to be brought forward. I know last biennium, there was a consideration of not reinvesting in this program by this committee for a number of different reasons. And one of them just being, once again, not really seeing the dollars used in the way that we intended them to be used, and really seeing that, that conversation of where other dollars were out there and being used in the system, perhaps more effectively or with a wider reach. So I imagine we'll be right back to that same conversation this time.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Padillas-Thompson. Any other questions from any other committee members on this particular budget? Not hearing anyone or seeing anyone wishing to be recognized, I believe we can go ahead and move on to our final budget this morning. Good job, committee. We're pretty good on time, and a lot of questions and a lot of good conversation. So with that, we have budget item 1533, the Nevada Knowledge Account. Director, if you and your person would like to give a brief overview, and then I'm going to start off with some questions, and then I have a couple other members who have questions also.
Okay, thank you. The Knowledge Fund was a heritage program, goes back, I believe, 2011, and funded later in 2014 with the idea of commercializing intellectual property developed at our universities. Chair, when we met after I took this job, you asked me to look more closely at this program, and we have legislation that we'll be bringing forward that will morph this into what will be called the Innovation Fund, not related to the Innovation Zone, I should say, but Innovation Fund, and with a series of changes in it. The way I see this program is that in this whole emerging technology world, this whole area of innovation and technology, kind of the whole Silicon Valley world, is that this fund gives Nevada a seat at the table. it provides us a way to partner on projects and to participate in this new fourth industrial revolution economy. And Karsten has managed this for many years. The governor prioritized appropriations for it in the state of the state. We received a letter in October from the university presidents and the chancellor in support of it. And Senator Cortez Masto's office, Senator herself, reached out and prioritized the continuation of the Knowledge Fund. And I said, well, I hear you, but we're going to bring changes to the program. I've been requested by the committee to do that. And we have, I think, AB 29 with some proposed changes to the program that we look forward to working with you on this session. Karsten is the subject matter expert on this and is available to answer questions about it.
Okay, thank you. Any statements from Carson?
This is Carsten Heiser for the record. At this moment, no, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes, there you are. Okay. So with that, I guess I'll open up with just a couple of quick questions. So I was here in 2011. It was my first year on Ways and Means, sitting in the front row, listening to the conversation about where we thought the knowledge account would go and the possibility. And I believe the thing that stuck with me the most was it was the research and commercialization of this and being able to use that to bring money back into the state, to be able to use research to bring dollars back towards the general fund. So the state would make an investment and then the state would eventually be repaid. As far as I can tell that and we know these things do take a while, but it has been a decade now. We are in 2021. And I would just like to, have a conversation about where we think that commercialization is going to be going. And then I guess we need an update on the current projects that you anticipate to continue through this biennium. So if you could address the current projects first, and then the commercialization issue, and then I'd be happy to open it up to other committee members.
This is Carsten Heiser for the record. These are excellent questions, and as I've been around also for a while, we have had these conversations before, and but for the benefit of members that are so new to the committee, let me go back to 2011 when this was first enacted, and then first funded in 2013, and then subsequently in 15, 17, and then through a reduction, but still in 19. So I wasn't around in 2011, but I started in early 2012. But I believe that if it was presented in 2011, that this would be a money-making machine for the state or in general, that would be inaccurate. Unless you really hit a home run of a spin out that will turn into, I don't know, a Facebook, a Google, or something equivalent. I just like to give you some statistics that sort of put this in perspective, and then also perspective as to where we are running with our metrics. And we are not too bad, actually. So if you go to the Intellectual Property Handbook, which is sort of like a standard publishing out there, they, on average, you get about 40 to 50 disclosures for every 100 million invested in adjusted research expenditures. That's adjusted for costs. Disclosures doesn't mean that will turn into a product or into a company. This is just disclosures. We have in our statistics so far about 67. We provided, I think, a slide in the presentation. So we are not doing too badly for about 32.5 million invested. Although I have to say a large number of those patents are relating to one project, which is concentrating mainly on gaming innovations. So you can't really compare those patents disclosures filings with, for example, I would say hardcore health technology tech or engineering tech, for example. But out of those, what the Intellectual Property Handbook also states is that out of that, you get about 50 in licensing or spin-outs per 100 million. So now we are moving towards a potential, hard cash return eventually. So 15 per 100 million. We are roughly at about 17. That's the number we have here on that slide. So we are not doing too badly either for 32.5 million invested. Going back to your question regarding, okay, when is revenue flowing back, or is there potential for money flowing back into the Knowledge Fund? Same source. The average income to an institution after about 8 to 10 years is about 1 to 2% of annual research expenditure. So that's sort of the target that you would be looking for a return coming back to us. Now, let me also sort of make clear that, going back to my earlier comment, that this should not be regarded as the money-making machine, but they're intangible, what I would call intangible, returns on investment that are, a multiple of the actual investment. So when you look at the metrics that we have to report on, we have, as I said, 32.5 million invested from the state, from the general fund. About slightly more than 35 million coming back to the 3 research institutions through grants. Almost 39.8 million are coming back to the research institutions in sponsored research contracts. So there's a multiplier effect. You see, just for example, I can give you 2 cases that really illustrate that and can link you back to Knowledge Fund projects. The first really major win of this grant matching we achieved through the Nevada Institute for Personalized Medicine at UNLV, where we put about 3.5 million in and got, and NIPM, that's the abbreviation for Nevada Institute for Personalized Medicine, got back 11 million from the National Institute for Health, NIH. We put in slightly short, but if you round up, $400,000 into a mining robotics project, which is linked to the Nevada Center for Applied Research at UNR. 400,000 turned into a more than 4 million grant that project won from DARPA. DARPA stands for the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. So we are hitting, we are doing pretty well. We are hitting home runs. But if you're looking for, okay, which is called sort of in this world the linear model, you invest in research capabilities, you create intellectual property, you file that, and then you go to find an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in residence to create a company, spin this company out from the university. Then this company then will have to raise money. And then hopefully it will scale. And eventually there will be, what we call a corporate action that will then generate revenue that's flowing then back. So that's sort of the linear model that I would caution against, because this is much more complex. There are feedback loops, for example, which we address through our investment in the Nevada Center for Applied Research. We are helping companies accessing university resources, helping existing companies, technology companies to scale. That, again, leads to economic development impact. It doesn't flow back to the Knowledge Fund, not back to the state, but it leads to tremendous impact to the economy in jobs. And as the director said, it gives us a seat at the table. We talked a lot about earlier on about workforce development, high-skilled jobs, attracting companies to the state. Well, in an innovation system, it's always regional. You're not going to attract the high-tech companies, the attractive companies that you're looking for, without that research, applied research expertise, without that providing conduit into the research institutions that will enable a company to leverage those resources. So also, you know, when you deal on this high technology end, you may spend money from the Knowledge Fund in you know, purchasing equipment to build research capacity to research institutions. What this leads to is, you know, your postdocs or your students will deal with that equipment, will actually learn how to use this equipment. When they then graduate, will be employed locally, you know, in Nevada at high-tech companies that you then also attracted with the help of the universities. They are used to deal with that high-tech equipment. So it's much more complex than you invest here and you get a return back. So I'm not trying to evade your question, but I'm trying to illustrate that it's more complex.
Let me just say on that topic, Madam Chair and members of the committee, this is an area where I came in and looked and I realized this is not going to be the complement to the liquor tax or the cigarette tax, or it just isn't. And we need to look at it as it sits today and what our university system needs and what the technology world is today, which is why I had Karsten work on AB 29 to bring forward so we can have that discussion, because I do think this is a space that Nevada needs to be in, and this is a vehicle that can put us into that space, and look forward to those discussions this session. But I am very realistic. I wasn't around in 11 when this was pitched, or at least it wasn't on my agenda, but if it was pitched as something that was going to be comparable to what you saw in those miscellaneous taxes, you know, I'm not sure that was realistic.
And thank you, Director. I just want to make sure that I'm perfectly clear as far as general fund goes. It was more of it would, as Mr. Heiser said, would create businesses that would create another level of diversification, which would create general fund. We understand it's a multi-stage process. It's been a decade, and I think it's appropriate for us to start asking some of these questions about self-sufficiency and where do we think we're going. You can only put so much money towards something in a while, and you really want to see some results. So I believe that's where we should have this very hard conversation about where do we need to be. So I appreciate that. The one part of the question I don't believe was answered, and if I could just get a real brief accounting on this, is the projects that you're anticipated to continue through 21 and 23. If I could just get the list of those, what we actually have in the queue right now.
Yeah, we will submit that and have this discussion, and I think it's very timely. You know, I have this cartoon in my office from the Utah newspaper in 1985, and in Utah there's this monument where the pioneers arrived, and it's called "This is the Place" monument. And in the editorial cartoon, they have right beside it the "I think I'll take that job in California" monument, because in the early 80s, when you were graduating from college in Utah, you went to California for a job. The economic transformation of Utah began in the 1980s. This is something that takes decades of commitment to, and now it's the most robust economy in the nation. I'd actually be glad to submit that cartoon for the record. But Madam Chair.
No cartoons. Okay. Gotta draw the line there. Gotta draw the line.
I heard you at Lou's Diner and your concerns about this program, and we've developed legislation, and we're very prepared to have that discussion and go where policymakers want the state to be.
That sounds great. I'm going to go to Ms. Monroe Moreno next.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Questions?
I too was not here in 2011 or 2013. So when I looked at the notes and discussing return on investment, I looked at the $32 million and thought that return on investment would be money would be coming back to the state in general funds. But hearing this discussion, that is not the case. But as I look at the metrics for the money that it has brought in on return on investment, can you tell us, were there any administrative fees that were associated with the grants that were received or the contracts, and what those fees were and how they were reinvested into the program?
This is Carsten Heiser for the record. From GOED's point of view, there are no fees on our end. It's the normal process. The university applies for a federal grant, for example, and then takes that grant in. the university strikes a contract with a private sector company for contract research, for example, and then the money flows into the university. There's no layer of cost at GoEd at all.
Yeah. I will say, Michael Brown, for the record, there is a large ecosystem of companies and academic folks that are involved in this, and we should also at some point hear from them, because I think they can fill in a lot of blanks as to what's going on in this space. Not today, but at some point in the future.
Okay, so if there are administrative fees that were associated with the grant, like for a number of grants, whoever writes that grant, there's a fee that they can charge, and then those fees stayed with the educational institution. It didn't go to GoEd or go to the state. That's what I'm hearing.
This is Carl for the record. There are no fees that GoEd charges. We actually, and actually I'm grateful for the question. We made very clear and had that inserted in the contracts with the universities from day one, i.e. from 2013 onwards, that there's there can be no administrative charges that the university can charge on money, on funds that are being extended to the universities on these general funds.
On the general funds, but they can on the grant itself.
The grant
and my question is, does that go back into the program to help perhaps offset what you're asking for in general funds this time, and as it leads forward to make it self-sufficient? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's Carsten Heiser for the record. The funds, if the universities win grants, they go directly to the university. It is not that they would go into the Knowledge Fund. However, the Knowledge Fund can be used, for example, for grant matching. So we have an allocation within our budget. And again, Madam Chair, to your earlier question, we submitted to LCB a list of what we see for the next biennium projects that we anticipate to be funded under the two scenarios, AB 29 passing and AB 29 not passing. So we have a line item currently in the knowledge account, which we can use, or the university can use as grant matching. We currently have actually one active, where the University of Nevada, Reno is waiting for an EDA grant news. I think it should be in the next couple of weeks, where we put up $50,000 for matching. But again, if that, for example, should the university win, the funds would go directly to the university.
And Madam Chair, just my final question. I was looking at some of the backup information that have been submitted online from GRI and UNR and UNLV. And on one, it says that there's 181 companies or agencies and orgs with memberships and agreements. Are those companies based here? And how many jobs did that actually, that 32.5 million bring us actual jobs and on the ground here in Nevada?
Yes, this is Carsten Heiser for the record. So when you go actually to our presentation of that slide and the table we inputted into that presentation, all the numbers here refer to companies in Nevada on the ground, the jobs created on the ground. So this is all Nevada specific.
And then last question, and I promise it's the last question. When do you see this fund being self-sufficient? Do you have a projected date that you would not be coming back to the state to ask for general fund money, or is it going to be a continual state putting in money, or will it get to a point where it is self-sufficient from the investment that the state has made?
This is Carsten Heiser for the record. Let me answer it this way. These programs that state governments or national governments run to, foster innovation that will then lead to, support of the regional innovation systems or, to company creation and so forth. They never cease. They're in perpetuity. But the structure of those programs change over time, which is why we have AB 29 for your consideration, where we are going to broaden the scope Fund if AB 29 or should AB 29 pass, you would have funds under the Nevada Innovation Fund, how it will then be called. Actually, the recipients, the eligible recipients, would go beyond the universities. You would be, supporting, for example, private high-tech companies at a very early stage, so small businesses, if they need research and development support, for example. We would have we could open a program for small business innovation research matching dollars. So the structure of those programs will change as the innovation economy of a state changes over time. So, for example, in 2011. When the knowledge fund was enacted, that was exactly at that time what would have been what was appropriate for Nevada. Now, so many years in, the knowledge fund needs to be reformed. So the structure changes, but you would expect, globally that's the case, that state governments, national governments will support their innovation systems over time in perpetuity.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity for the questions. Being that I was not here in 2011, I've learned a lot today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Monroe Moreno. I believe I have Ms. Sievers-Gansert next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a little different perspective, or several perspectives on this. So I was working as Governor Sandoval's chief of staff in 2011 when we put this together. And then it wasn't funded to 2013. And I think originally there was some look at commercialization, but I also have worked in higher ed, and now I serve, of course, as a senator. And what I've seen, the value that I've seen in the return on investment has really been in supporting the research and development of new and existing companies in Nevada, and also the startup of companies. And the university system has played a critical role in actually diversifying the economy and providing support. So I appreciated that Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno brought up the return on investment, because when you look at the metrics for $32 million of knowledge fund dollars, we've had $35 million in grants and donations and another $39 million of sponsored research contracts that have been obtained. So those are huge amounts of dollars that are basically that we've been leveraging the knowledge fund dollars to get these external primary dollars into our state. And those dollars really help expand high level, well-paid jobs. And so I didn't know if this is the right committee or not, but the institutions have all the different projects, and it might be worthwhile to have some of them spend 2 minutes. And I do mean like 2 minutes on some of the work that they've done, because really, there's been so much money that's leveraged, and it's not in the commercialization space as much as it is in R&D and supporting the growth of existing and new businesses in our state. So I don't know if you want to take that time or not, but that's where I've seen the value in this program.
Thank you, Ms. Sievers-Gansert. Ms. Benitez-Thompson, did you have a question on this? Oh, no, I'm sorry, wrong chain. I believe I have Mr. Watts next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've got a couple questions. I'll try and keep them very brief. So, I know that at some point it looked like there was going to be an extra $1.2 million coming back from commercialization revenue, but in fact that revenue actually goes back to the institutions. And so I guess my first question is, and I know that there's a lot of conversations on this item in particular that also deal with some of the changes contemplated under AB 29, and I want to try and avoid turning this into a policy hearing about that. But based on the current structure and the current grants that are listed, how did the $1.2 million in commercialization revenue flowing back to the institutions influence that? In other words, did it cover some projects that otherwise the state may have been looking at providing additional funding for? How did that alter kind of the matrix of projects that are under consideration?
Carsten Heiser for the record. Let me just briefly respond to Senator Gansett's comment, which is very valid. I've got all the three universities on standby here, and they are happy to spend these 2 minutes during public comment and explain in more detail. And also, Assemblyman Watts, your question. I can't exactly answer this, but I can give you a little bit of background, how we structured commercialization revenue, how to be dealt with. We had inserted into the contracts for the first, I think, 3 funding cycles that the universities can retain those commercialization revenue up to a threshold of 1.5 million. Reason being, we wanted to give them an incentive. You rightly point out it's 1.2, so it's slightly short of that threshold. So 2 remarks to that. One is that to your question also, how is this being distributed? NG has a relatively complicated sort of formula how to distribute those revenues, but they are fairly generous to the inventor. So you would get the large or the bulk of it to the inventor. The remaining will then be distributed within the universities to, I believe, the Vice President for Research Office, the department, and then there's the residual. So that in sort of mathematically, what this comes down to is, when that's in our contracts, is 1/6 of what's been generated above a threshold would potentially flow back into the knowledge fund. So you're talking at a relatively small amount. Again, that's predominantly because of the NG formula. So the majority goes to the inventor. This is either NG changes that, but we, from the knowledge fund's point of view, cannot do that. So that's one comment, and I appreciate that we don't want to turn this into an AB 29 hearing, but in AB 29 we address this because we, as Madam Chair, we have testified before, and the question came up many times. So in AB 29 we address commercialization revenue. We actually broadened the definition, and I'm hoping we have captured at least some of your concerns, but we would be talking more than what we have here on paper, the 1.2. We are broadening it. So this is a sort of brief answer to your question, hopefully.
Thank you. And just as a quick follow-up on that, so just to get clarification, because you also spoke about kind of how things go when they get go over that threshold, but with the $1.2 million, does that is that revenue go back to the inventor, and is it focused on research, or does it go just generically to the institution?
I would defer to the institutions later when they are on exactly how this works, but it goes to the inventor. I mean, the inventor is, is getting this incentive to, generate intellectual property that then will later be commercialized. So the inventor benefits, and then there are portions that go to the university's general, account, as well as the department, as well as the Vice President for Research Office.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification on that. And one final quick question. Again, I don't want this to turn into a discussion, a full-blown hearing on Assembly Bill 29, but based on the current structure of the Knowledge Fund and some of the past projects and the results that you've provided to us, what are some of the things that you've seen that have worked? What are some of the challenges that have come up? And how can we target those investments currently to adapt to our economic development strategy? So I know GOED just put out, a new report and looked at some key areas. How are we able to target the Knowledge Fund to support economic development and diversification within those key target areas?
This is Carsten Heiser for the record. Excellent question. I'm really grateful for that. Gives me sort of the opportunity to illustrate a little bit of what has really worked. And echoing Senator Gansard's comments, what really has worked is when we invest general fund dollars to create research capacity or applied research and development capacity at the research institutions. But then the research institutions engage with the private sector. So you would have, flagship projects at the University of Nevada, Reno, for example, the Nevada Center for Applied Research. Dr. Gotham, the Vice President for Research for UNR, is going to, illustrate this in his public comment. But that center provided, we've developed a concept, I don't want to go into detail here, but we developed this concept called Applied Research Center model, where the university takes up the role of what we call an outsourced R&D department, an outsourced research and development department to a private sector company to provide innovation on-demand services. That means the university actually opens the campus, embeds early stage high growth companies on the campus. So there are, for example, at UNR about 29 companies currently on campus. They have they get a safe zone where they can grow and scale, as well as accessing university resources. Then after they reach a certain size, they sort of graduate and I wouldn't say exit, but they leave campus and then scale on their own in the region, while still ideally continue to engage with the universities. You have a similar approach at Blackfire Innovation Center in Las Vegas at UNLV, where that center provides this access of companies that the safe zone where they can be incubated, where they get access to expertise of the universities. So that has really worked extremely well. So when you see in the statistics or in the table, jobs created, this is at companies that have engaged and still are engaging with the university. That has led over time to a mindset change at the universities as well. So faculty have learned how to engage with the private sector. So faculty also slowly are pivoting their focus towards more, closer to market research. So we have some success stories of actual spin-outs. That goes back to the original model of the Knowledge Fund that we had in 2011, or was there at that time the vision of looking at the U-Star model of impact faculty creating research that then leads to spin-outs. The Nevada Institute for Personalized Medicine has spun out 3 companies. One of them, Halogenics, recently raised an investment round. The Desert Research Institute has spun out one recent spin-out that also raised up to 1 million, or close to about 1 million investments from private investors to Biomics. So we are getting traction there as well. But the engagement of the university with early stage high growth companies, startups, that's really where I think we can really have this multiplier effect going forward. That has worked well. And again, not taking this into a 29.
Let me interject, if I could, Karsten, also. Senator and Madam Chair, Senator, you raised a very good point. And one of the few advantages that's come out of this pandemic is that we have this technology, this Zoom technology. If I wanted to bring a subject matter expert to Nevada to speak to the Assembly or the Senate in the last session, they'd have to make a business trip here, maybe 3 days if they came from the East Coast. Now I can get the best and brightest and bring them right into one of these legislative hearings. This is an exciting area for Nevada, and as someone who once used a modem, I'm probably not the most qualified to speak to it. I still have a typewriter that I enjoy using. I need to get the kind of folks that are in this space before you. I need to get maybe Roland Stevens from SRI International to talk to some of these matters. Because of our geographic proximity, we had all of these executives from Silicon Valley living at Lake Tahoe, just as we had film executives living in Henderson that are looking at Nevada as a land of opportunity. And what I see this knowledge fund, it's the ticket for Nevada in the door to sit at the table to attract those industries. But as a former modem user, I'm probably not the most qualified to speak to it. And I'd like to get the people who are in front of you via this technology.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Watson, and thank you, Mr. Brown. We are about to infringe upon the Senate's time. So I'd like us to be very brief in our last couple of questions, if that's possible. Ms. Tolles, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's hard to be brief because this is such an important topic, but
I understand, but we're imposing upon the Senate's time right now, so we need to get it wrapped up.
Of course. So I think just to summarize everything that we talked about, it might be really helpful for the benefit of the committee if you have a list of those successes that you've referenced in one place that we could all look at, and then current projects underway as a result of this knowledge fund. I think that would just be a great way for us to help quantify the benefits so far and the value of that investment. And
Madam Chair, we have that list and we have some vignettes, and we'll provide that for the record.
And thank you, Mr. Brown. And that is a question that I asked at the very beginning of this conversation, and it was kind of difficult to get an answer on. So I look forward to getting that list. Instead, I got a very long explanation about a lot of other things. So with that, if I don't see any other questions at this time, I believe Senator Brooks, you had something.
Madam Chair, and this is, I believe in your mission. I think you're doing a great job. I think that diversification is important in what you do every day. I also realize, Director Brown, you came over to this agency right before a pandemic and when all the rules went out the window. And but I will say it's working, but where is it working? And I direct you back, and this isn't a criticism, this is a suggestion. I direct you back to the statement you made when we opened this. Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. And it's clear that for decades, the value hasn't been Southern Nevada. And now we are feeling the results of that. The entire state is feeling the results of that. So, moving forward, we have to dedicate resources, and that means budgets to Southern Nevada. That means full-time employees to Southern Nevada. That means offices to Southern Nevada. That means programs in Southern Nevada.
Madam Chair, Senator, I understand, and this is I've identified this, and this is where we're going to be working. It is what I value for this state to get to the level of diversification that brings fiscal stability. It will take a much stronger commitment in Southern Nevada.
Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I don't believe we have any other questions or comments. Senator Brooks wrapped it up very well. So with that, committee members, that is our last budget for today. We do have public comment. So we'll give it a moment to switch over to public comment. It is 10:56. So we'll wait a moment. Senate Majority Leader, I apologize for going over a little bit today, but as you saw, we had a lot of questions. And with a program that's been this long, I think it's good that we had this conversation. This will not be the only conversation. This will be ongoing for a while. So we'll keep talking about these issues when dollars are very precious this session. So let's give it a moment, and then we'll let Broadcast Services queue up any public comment we might have.
Chair, this is Michael from Broadcast. We have 2 callers already. I can start with those, or I can wait if you'd like.
No, let's go. Let's get them done. So bring up the first person, please. I bet it's Mr. Cohen.
You got it. We'll find out.
Okay.
Hello, caller with the last 3 digits, 580. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 580. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. I'm going to move on to the next caller. Hello, caller with the last 3 digits, 837. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Kent Irvin, E-R-V-I-N, with the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Just 2 quick points. Knowledge and research is a common good that you can't always measure with a direct financial return. For example, getting COVID-19 vaccines after just 1 year is totally amazing. And that was enabled because of decades of research, mostly at universities, into messenger RNA and other genetic methods. Second, to address a point earlier, facilities and administration funds from external grants at the universities largely go back into research, including equipping labs to support new hires, that is, for startup costs for new projects. Thank you very much.
Any other callers at this time?
We have one more I'm going to try. Caller with the last 3 digits, 508. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, this is Bo Bernhard, Vice President of Economic Development at UNLV. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I sure appreciated the entire content today. We are all very much aligned. I am a 5th-generation Nevadan and very much excited about this quality of conversation. I'm excited, too, to talk about the Knowledge Fund. I was there, and alongside Senator Gansert was very pleased with then Governor Sandoval's leadership, in addition to now Congressman Stephen Horsford's leadership on this issue. And we'll get to that in a moment. But I do want to talk to these successes because they're significant, and they also are, I'm afraid, perhaps not being conveyed in quite the way that they could. And I'll be very direct and quick. The Raiders would not have happened without the Knowledge Fund. The Knowledge Fund, with a $250,000 seed grant, seeded an organization at UNLV that created a classroom environment that leaders in Las Vegas came to and then came up with the idea to approach the Raiders with the proposal. This has been told in a frankly endearing ESPN story that I'll forward to the members of this committee. But that is in itself billions of dollars of what used to be a California company and now is very happily a Las Vegas company paying taxes into our state's coffers. I also would point out that the Harry Reid Research and Technology Park is a $35 million facility that we didn't have before as we sought to build this innovation ecosystem again in 2011. That facility that Harry Reid set aside the land for, but that the state paid $0 for, and in fact corporations like Intel, Adobe, Panasonic, LG, Caesars, and others are very proudly now a part of, was paid for entirely outside of the state's funds. We also have significant medical school wins that, again, it's not the case that the medical school would not have happened, but it would not have been the medical school that it is at UNLV without $16 million in NIH funding that came through the Nevada Institute of Personalized Medicine. And looking forward, what we are seeking to sponsor, as you heard Governor Sisolak in his State of the State speak to, is this very exciting development of room temperature superconducting. I can tell you that every company in Silicon Valley wishes that they were the ones who discovered this. This happened in a lab in Maryland Parkway, and that is what we will be funding with hopefully the kindness of this legislature, the next round of innovation funding. And once more, just to speak to what was going on during the 2011 conversations, I remember very distinctly Steve Hill, the then head of GOED, saying, Yeah, this is the kind of thing that could actually even give money back to the state if things go really well. But I'm kind of struck by how central to the conversation this notion that this was designed like the cigarette tax or the alcohol tax, as we heard earlier. That was certainly not the intent. The intent was to build an innovation ecosystem in a state that desperately needed it for diversification. And on that front, I would submit, speaking for the $10 million that's been invested in just the UNLV proportion, and I know there are victories that my colleagues elsewhere can speak to as well. This certainly is a program that has delivered, and I look forward to telling that story. Thank you.
Any other callers?
Chair Carlton, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no more callers at this time.
Thank you very much. So with that, committee members, our committee is now over. Again, my apologies to the Senate. Didn't mean for this to happen, but good conversation. We are adjourned.